High on a Virginia hill, there stand a mansion that whispers two very different stories. To the world, Monticello shines as the home of Thomas Jefferson, the man who wrote of liberty and shaped a nation's destiny. Yet behind its grand dome and elegant halls lie shadows, secrets of power, silence, and lives hidden from view. Was Monticello a masterpiece of vision, or a stage for contradictions that America still struggles to face? How could man, who dreamed of freedom, build a world on the labor of those denied it? And why does this house, more than 2 centuries later, continue to raise questions that history has never fully answered? The journey into Monticello is not just a look into one man's home. It is an invitation to uncover the mysteries of America itself. Welcome to the History Vault. Stay with us as we uncover history. Thomas Jefferson was born on April 13, 1743, in the rolling countryside of Virginia, at a place called Shadwell, the family plantation. The air of colonial Virginia was filled with the sounds of nature, and Jefferson's earliest days were spent surrounded by both the beauty of the wilderness and the structure of a prosperous household. His father, Peter Jefferson, was a self-made man, known for his skills as a surveyor, planter, and explorer. He had a strong will and an adventurous spirit, traits that Thomas would carry with him throughout his life. His mother, Jane Randolph Jefferson, came from one of the most respected families in Virginia, bringing with her refinement, tradition, and the pride of lineage. From this union, Thomas inherited both toughness and grace, qualities that shaped his character from the very beginning. As a child, Thomas grew up in a household filled with books, maps, and a constant hum of activity. His father's work as a land surveyor meant young Thomas often saw maps spread across tables, instruments for measuring distance, and stories about the lands of Virginia and beyond. These images captured his imagination and planted the seeds of curiosity about the wider world. His mother, on the other hand, encouraged his appreciation of music and literature. Jefferson learned to play the violin at a young age, and music became a lifelong comfort to him. Between the rugged lessons from his father and the gentler guidance of his mother, Thomas's early environment offered a balanced foundation that encouraged both discipline and creativity. The land itself played a powerful role in Jefferson's childhood. The Virginia countryside was more than a backdrop. It was a classroom in its own right. He roamed the hills and fields, observed the patterns of seasons, and studied the behavior of plants and animals. This connection to the natural world never left him. Later in life, when designing Monticello and experimenting with farming techniques, Jefferson drew on the observations he made as a boy. His early love for the land and its mysteries inspired him to blend science, architecture, and agriculture in ways that were ahead of his time. Education entered Jefferson's life at an early stage, and he proved to be a quick learner. He was first taught at home by tutors who introduced him to reading, writing, and classical languages. The study of Latin and Greek gave him access to ancient texts, and he became fascinated by the works of classical thinkers whose ideas about government, philosophy, and human behavior would later influence his vision for America. By the time he was 9, Jefferson had already developed a reputation within his family as a boy with a sharp mind and endless curiosity. He absorbed knowledge eagerly, moving from one subject to another, never content to know only a little. Tragedy struck when Thomas was only 14 years old. His father, Peter Jefferson, died suddenly in 1757. The loss deeply affected him, but it also forced him to grow up quickly. As the oldest son, he became responsible for his family's estate, inheriting land, enslaved workers, and property. While still in his teens, Jefferson found himself managing responsibilities far beyond his years. This early burden of duty likely shaped his later confidence in handling large tasks, such as leading a new nation. At the same time, the reality of inheriting enslaved people would be a shadow that followed him throughout his life, one that tied his story to both greatness and contradiction. Despite this heavy responsibility, Jefferson continued his education. He studied under Reverend James Morey, a respected teacher who introduced him to philosophy, mathematics, and literature. Morey School also provided Jefferson with access to a broader range of books and ideas, exposing him to Enlightenment thought. This period was crucial, as it taught him how to question accepted norms and explore the relationship between knowledge and human progress. For Jefferson, learning was never just about memorizing facts. It was about understanding the world and finding ways to improve it. During his teenage years, Jefferson also began to develop personal interests that would last his entire life. He became fascinated with architecture, sketching designs and studying buildings. He imagined houses that blended beauty with function, a passion that eventually led to his creation of Monticello. He also grew more devoted to music, often practicing the violin late into the night. These pursuits were not distractions, but extensions of his search for harmony between mind, body, and spirit. In these quiet activities, Jefferson revealed the personality of a thinker and dreamer who sought to bring order and creativity into every part of his life. By the time Jefferson was 16, he was ready to leave home for advanced studies. His journey from Shadwell to the College of William and Mary marked the first step toward a broader world, but the foundation had already been laid in his boyhood. The combination of a strong family heritage, a love of the Virginia countryside, exposure to books and music, and the guidance of influential teachers gave him the tools he needed to rise beyond the limits of his surroundings. Each piece of his early story contributed to the larger narrative of the man he would become: a leader, a thinker, a builder, and a paradox. The beginning of Thomas Jefferson's life was not just about childhood memories. It was a shaping of mind that would later influence the birth of a nation. From his father's rugged determination to his mother's refined upbringing, from the rolling hills of Virginia to the quiet hours spent with books and violin strings, every detail formed a boy destined for greatness and burdened with contradictions. In looking back at this beginning, we see more than a child growing up. We witness the earliest sparks of vision that would take shape at Monticello and in the very foundations of the United States. When Thomas Jefferson left Shadwell as a teenager to begin his studies at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia, he carried with him the lessons of his childhood and the curiosity that had already become his signature trait. Williamsburg at the time was not just a small town. It was a capital of colonial Virginia, alive with politics, culture, and debate. For a young Jefferson, the city offered something far greater than formal schooling. It was a place where ideas about law, liberty, and government were constantly in motion. At William and Mary, Jefferson quickly distinguished himself. He was tall, quiet, and thoughtful, with a reserved manner that sometimes made him seem distant, but inside, his mind was racing. He studied under some of the brightest teachers of the colony, including Dr. William Small, a professor of philosophy who exposed him to Enlightenment thinkers like Locke, Bacon, and Newton. For Jefferson, these were not just names on a page. They were guides into a new way of understanding the world. Through these ideas, Jefferson began shaping his own philosophy of reason, knowledge, and human progress. In addition to philosophy, Jefferson studied mathematics, science, and law, and his appetite for learning was insatiable. He would spend long hours buried in books, often reading late into the night. His fellow students noted that he seemed to prefer the company of texts over people, and yet his brilliance shone so brightly that he quickly earned the respect of both peers and mentors. His love of order and precision extended even to his study habits, where he created strict schedules to balance time between different subjects. This discipline would remain a constant throughout his life. Music remained another passion during these years. Jefferson brought his violin with him to Williamsburg, and though he was consumed by his studies, he continued to play whenever he could. It was a way to keep balance in his life, a reminder that beauty and creativity had as much importance as logic and law. He believed that music nurtured the soul, just as learning nurtured the mind, and both would be necessary for the life he envisioned. After finishing his studies at William and Mary, Jefferson pursued law, training under George Wythe, one of the most respected legal scholars of the time. Under Wythe's guidance, Jefferson studied not only English law, but also classical principles of justice and equity. Wythe encouraged him to think about law not as a rigid system, but as a tool for fairness and improvement of society. This way of thinking left a deep impression on Jefferson, who began to see law as a path to public service and reform. Jefferson's early legal career brought him into contact with Virginia's elite as well as everyday colonists. He represented clients, drafted documents, and built a reputation for being meticulous and fair. At the same time, he continued to expand his personal library, which eventually became one of the largest in America. Books for Jefferson were more than possessions. They were companions, shaping his mind and feeding his relentless hunger for knowledge. It was during this period that Jefferson's sense of purpose began to grow. He realized that education had given him more than just personal success. It had given him the tools to shape the world around him. He became convinced that an educated people were the foundation of a free society. This belief, planted during his own journey as a student, would later lead him to establish the University of Virginia, one of his proudest legacies. Jefferson's education was not confined to the classroom. Living in Williamsburg exposed him to the political debates of the time, as Virginia's leaders discussed taxes, representation, and the growing tension with Britain. Jefferson listened closely, often standing on the edge of conversations, absorbing every detail. Slowly, he began to connect the ideas of Enlightenment with the realities of colonial life. He saw the gap between the ideals of liberty and the restrictions placed upon the colonies, and this contradiction sparked the beginnings of his political vision. By the time Jefferson completed his education and entered public life, he had become more than just a lawyer. He had become a thinker, a man with a vision for how society could be guided by reason, fairness, and a love for learning. His early years of study at William and Mary, his mentorship under George Wythe, and his endless hours spent reading shaped him into a figure prepared for monumental tasks that lay ahead. Jefferson's education was not simply about personal growth. It was a foundation of his role as a leader. It gave him the confidence to question authority, the discipline to master complex ideas, and imagination to see possibilities that others might miss. In his quiet, deliberate way, Jefferson was preparing for a future in which he would write words that echoed across centuries, shaping the destiny of a new nation. As Jefferson grew into adulthood, the world around him was changing, and he was ready to step onto stage. By his late 20s, his reputation as a skilled lawyer and thoughtful thinker had already earned him a place among Virginia's most promising young men. He had the rare ability to combine deep knowledge with a calm and reasoned voice, and in an age when fiery speeches often carried the day, Jefferson's quiet conviction made him stand out even more. In 1769, Jefferson was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses, the colony's legislative body. He entered politics not with grand gestures, but with careful attention to detail, writing drafts and proposals that were practical yet forward-looking. He spoke little, but when he did, people listened. He believed that actions and ideas mattered more than performances. It was in these years that Jefferson began to shape his views on liberty, government, and the rights of people. The tensions between Britain and its American colonies were rising, and Jefferson, like many others, felt the pull of independence. His pen became his greatest weapon. In 1774, he published A Summary View of the Rights of British America, a pamphlet that boldly argued that the colonies were not subjects of Parliament, but free people with their own rights. This work caught the attention of leaders beyond Virginia, including those who would soon gather to chart a new course for America. By 1775, the Revolution had begun, and Jefferson's talents were needed more than ever. The following year, he was chosen to serve on the committee tasked with drafting a Declaration of Independence. At just 33 years old, Jefferson took the lead in writing what would become one of the most famous documents in human history. His words captured the spirit of the Revolution with unmatched clarity, that all men are created equal, endowed with rights that no king or government could take away. The Declaration of Independence was Jefferson's greatest achievement, but it was also only the beginning. He continued to serve in public roles, helping to shape Virginia's new government. He worked on reforms for education, religion, and the legal system, believing that the new nation must be built on a foundation of reason and justice. He argued for freedom of religion, introducing bills that would guarantee people the right to worship as they chose, free from state control. In 1779, Jefferson became governor of Virginia during the turbulent years of the Revolution. His time in office was difficult, marked by British invasions and political challenges. Though his leadership was criticized at times, Jefferson remained committed to the cause of independence. He believed that leadership was not about glory but about service, even when the path was hard. After the war, Jefferson continued his service at the national level. He was sent to France as a diplomat, where he observed firsthand the culture, politics, and unrest that would eventually spark the French Revolution. He admired the French Enlightenment thinkers and their emphasis on reason and progress, but he also understood the dangers of unchecked power. His time in France broadened his view of the world and influenced his later policies. When he returned to America, Jefferson became the nation's first Secretary of State under George Washington. He clashed with Alexander Hamilton over the direction of the new country, especially on issues of finance and federal power. Jefferson feared a government too strong could become oppressive, while Hamilton pushed for a strong central system. Their rivalry shaped the early political parties, with Jefferson leading what became known as the Democratic Republicans, emphasizing agriculture, local government, and the rights of citizens. In 1801, Jefferson achieved the highest office in the land when he became the third president of the United States. His presidency was marked by significant accomplishments, including the Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the size of the young nation, and the Lewis and Clark Expedition, which explored its vast new lands. Jefferson dreamed of an America built on opportunity, land for farmers, and society where knowledge and freedom thrived. Yet his achievements were not without contradictions. While he spoke of liberty and equality, he remained a slaveholder, benefiting from a system he never fully renounced. This paradox would shadow his legacy, but also showed the complexities of a man shaped by his time. Jefferson's achievements were vast, but perhaps his greatest gift was his ability to put into words the hopes and dreams of a nation. He did not always succeed in practice, but through his writing, leadership, and vision, he helped create a foundation that still guides America today. As Jefferson aged, his life slowed, yet his mind never rested. After serving 2 terms as president, he retired to Monticello, the home he had designed and loved since his youth. It was here on the hilltop overlooking the Virginia countryside that Jefferson spent his later years surrounded by books, gardens, and memories of a life filled with triumphs and trials. In retirement, Jefferson devoted much of his time to his lifelong passion for learning. His personal library, already one of the largest in America, continued to grow. He studied science, architecture, philosophy, and agriculture with the same intensity he had as a young man. He once said he could not live without books, and even in old age, he believed knowledge was a light that guided human progress. His dream of education for all did not fade with time. In his later years, Jefferson worked tirelessly to establish the University of Virginia. He designed the buildings, planned the curriculum, and even recruited professors. For Jefferson, the university was not just an institution but a legacy, a place where future generations could learn freely, guided by reason and curiosity rather than dogma. He considered this achievement one of the 3 great accomplishments of his life, alongside the Declaration of Independence and the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. But old age also brought challenges. Jefferson's health began to decline, and the burden of debt weighed heavily on him. Despite his accomplishments, his personal finances were in ruins, largely due to the upkeep of Monticello and his dependence on the labor of enslaved workers. This contradiction, a man who championed liberty yet relied on slavery, haunted both his estate and his conscience. The enslaved men and women at Monticello kept the plantation running, even as Jefferson wrote of freedom and human rights. Jefferson's personal life in old age was filled with both joy and sorrow. He found comfort in his family, especially his daughters and grandchildren, who often visited Monticello. Yet he also endured loss, having buried his beloved wife Martha many years earlier. The absence of her presence never left him, and he never remarried, carrying her memory until the end. As the years passed, Jefferson became a revered elder statesman. Letters poured in from across the nation, seeking his thoughts on politics, philosophy, and the future of the country. He answered many of them with the same care and precision he had given to his earlier writings. Even in his final years, he remained a voice of reason and reflection, shaping conversations that would guide generations to come. One of the most remarkable moments of his old age came in 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson had lived to see the nation he helped create survive wars, grow in size, and begin to take shape as a true democracy. That same year, on July 4th, Jefferson passed away at Monticello, just hours before his old friend and rival John Adams also died in Massachusetts. It was a striking coincidence that 2 of America's founding figures, who had once clashed and later reconciled, would leave the world on the very day the nation celebrated independence. Jefferson's death marked the end of an era, but his reflections in old age remind us that he was never simply a man of words. He was a man who wrestled with contradictions, who dreamed of liberty yet lived with inequality, who sought knowledge even in his final days, and who believed that education was a true safeguard of freedom. His old age was a time of quiet contemplation, but it was also a final chapter that tied together the story of life lived at the heart of a nation's birth. After Jefferson's death, Monticello stood not only as his home, but as a symbol of his life and legacy. Perched on the Virginia hilltop, the house, with its iconic dome and elegant design, became a place where the contradictions and achievement of America could be seen in one space. It was here that Jefferson's vision of beauty, order, and progress was made real, yet it was also here that the story of slavery and inequality left its marks. Monticello remained in the Jefferson family for some years, but debt eventually forced its sale. Over time, the house fell into disrepair, a fading reflection of its former glory. Yet Monticello's story was too important to vanish. In the early 20th century, preservation efforts began, and eventually the Thomas Jefferson Foundation took ownership. Their work restored Monticello to the splendor Jefferson had imagined, making it not just a historic site, but a living museum of American history. Today, Monticello is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a rare honor shared with only a handful of places in the United States. It welcomes visitors from around the world who walk its halls, explore its gardens, and learn about both Jefferson's genius and the lives of the enslaved workers who sustained it. Monticello has become a place where history is told with honesty, not only the brilliance of Jefferson, but also the contradictions he embodied. Visitors to Monticello can see Jefferson's innovations firsthand. The revolving bookstand, the hidden dumbwaiter, the architectural details that blend classical design with creative ingenuity. They can also walk through Mulberry Row, where enslaved families lived and worked, hearing their stories and understanding the full scope of life at Monticello. This state has become a space where America confronts its past, celebrating achievement while acknowledging injustice. Monticello's legacy reaches beyond its walls. It stands as a symbol of Jefferson's enduring impact on the nation. His words in the Declaration of Independence continue to inspire movements for freedom and equality around the world. His vision for education lives on in the University of Virginia, still thriving as a center of learning, and his home itself remains a reminder that history is complex, layered with triumphs and contradictions. In the present day, Monticello is more than a monument. It is a classroom for all who visit. It tells the story of a man who dreamed of liberty, designed a masterpiece of architecture, and shaped a nation, even while struggling with the contradictions of his own life. It encourages reflection on how far America has come and how much further it must go. Monticello is not frozen in time. Its curators continue to uncover new stories, using archaeology, research, and oral histories to bring forward voices once forgotten. The lives of enslaved men and women, once hidden in the shadows of history, are now given space and recognition. This commitment to truth ensures that Monticello's story is told fully, with all its complexity. For visitors standing on its hilltop today, Monticello offers more than just a view of Virginia's rolling countryside. It offers a view into the heart of America's story, its ideals, its struggles, and its continuing journey. Jefferson's home, like the nation itself, is both beautiful and imperfect, both inspiring and sobering. Its preservation ensures that future generations can walk the same paths, see the same dome against the sky, and feel the weight of history in every stone. Monticello remains a place where the past speaks to the present, urging us to remember, to learn, and to strive toward the ideals that Jefferson wrote, but never fully lived. It is this blend of vision and contradiction that makes Monticello one of the most significant historic places in the United States today. Monticello still rises against the Virginia sky, its dome catching the same sunlight Jefferson once admired. Yet for all its beauty, it is not only a monument of brilliance, but also a reminder of contradictions that refuse to fade. Jefferson dreamed of liberty but lived with inequality. He built a house of innovation, but filled it with silence. Today, Monticello stands as both a triumph and a question mark, inviting us to ask what freedom truly means and how a nation built on ideals can reconcile with the shadows of its past. The story of Monticello does not end with Jefferson's death. It continues every time we look at its walls and wonder whose voices still remain unheard. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to History Vault, your gateway to the past.